Hello, everybody, and welcome back to another exciting episode of the Grief Let's Talk About It podcast. You guys know who it is. This is Tony Lynch. I'm the host of this podcast, and yes, we are your number one podcast from bringing you stories around death, dying, and grief, and all the messiness that comes in between with some amazing people who not only walk the walk, but talk the talk, and are here changing people's lives one heartbeat at a time. Now, before I bring on my next guest, if this is your first time tuning in, do me a favor, head on over to their YouTube channel, hit that subscribe button, hit that bell notification so you'll be notified every time that we drop a new episode. But most importantly, maybe you know someone who can benefit from the conversations that we have. Do me a favor, share this along with them. This is a live stream event, so please get your questions or comments ready. Put them in the comment section. We'll be sure to answer them as we go. Now, before I bring on the next guest, I would like to say that this is for entertainment purposes only. Now, guys, help me welcome my next guest, Dr. NaKaisha, to the show. Hi.
Hello,
How are
Tony.
we
How you
doing
doing?
today? I'm doing
Good.
amazing. I'm doing amazing. How are you doing?
I am doing well. I'm excited to be here and share a little bit with your audience and just grace the people with what we got today.
Oh man, I'm looking forward to this. Ever since the last time, I was like, oh, "We're about to have some fun. We're about to, girl. You have no idea of how exciting this is for me, right?" Now,
Yes.
before we get into your story, um, introduce yourself to the audience. Tell people who you are, where you're from, and about the work that you do.
Yes. So I am Dr. NaKaisha Tolbert-Banks. I am by trade a clinical social worker, licensed clinical social worker. I have always been in social work. It's a passion of mine. I'll share a little bit more kind of where I started and how I ended up where I am. But I reside in the Midwest, so I hail from the Midwest. And I have been, let's see, in my line of work, working with people from all different ranges, children, families, grief, loss, depression, anxiety, all the things, the whole kind of
Yeah.
spectrum and range, but also the good things too. I think sometimes we forget about the good stuff. So I've seen lots of that as well. Um, so I'm excited to just be here today and talking with Tony about all the things grief and support related. So here we are.
Yeah. Now, which leads me to my first topic. How did you get into doing social work?
Yeah. So I was very young. I was a teenager and I did a lot of volunteering. So through volunteering, just in my community, some of it was made to do by my parents, and some of it was volunteer that I actually wanted to do. So um, that's how I really got into it. And being able to work in a retirement community,
Okay.
just volunteering there is kind of where it started. And I actually enjoyed it and had missed a couple weeks for whatever reason. And when I finally went back, the seniors were so happy to see me. They're like, "Oh my gosh, we thought something happened. We didn't know where you were." And it was like in that moment that I realized that I was making an impact because, to me being a teenager, they just seemed like grumpy people. Like they weren't excited when I would come, in to do activities and things. They were just kind of there and they'd moan and complain. But then when I wasn't there for a couple weeks, then they were like, "Well, we missed you and you need to let us know when you're not going to be here," and things like that. So it was then that I decided that maybe helping people or being in the helping profession wouldn't be a bad idea. And so I think just that experience kind of helped to groom me and grow me into the servanthood of life and where I am now.
Yeah, the act of
Yeah.
service, right? A
Yeah.
lot of times we live out our love language,
Yeah.
and that's a beautiful thing, right? That
Mhm.
is definitely a beautiful thing because I know people who can't even identify their love language, but yet they do
Yeah.
it every day, right?
Mhm. Right.
And
Yeah.
and that's that. I was then look and go, I could tell you, but I think I don't know if you would believe me or not, but
Yeah.
so so I love watching people do that as well. What are some of the
Yeah.
what are some of the challenges as a social worker that have you ever come across, and and how did it affect you in the work that you do, like growth wise?
Yeah. Um, just like with, I think any job, um, social work for me has its challenges, but I knew that going in. And I think
Hmm.
when you tell yourself that not every day is going to be, my favorite term is rainbow, sunshine, and unicorns, right? So
Hmm.
you
Hmm.
know that it's not going to be all bright and flowery and smelling good, and there are going to be some really tough things that you're going to have to overcome. I think I set myself up for a positive experience in that regard. So when the
Hmm.
tough times did come or the hard things did come, that I was a bit more mentally prepared, because I think it's the mental that really kind of changes the dynamics of how we see things, right? So
Right.
um I think not being prepared will kind of put you in a space where you're struggling a little bit more. And so
Hmm.
I think part of life and having elders who taught me a lot of things about life and death and not giving up when things get hard, and pushing through when things get hard, or asking for help when things get hard,
Yeah.
just having that guidance and that support when I was younger just kind of helped to grow me as I got older. And so those tough experiences, I think, are ones that when you get to it, you never know when they're going to come. I always, tell people I never have the same day twice. So, um,
Hmm.
you know, when I get to a point to where the tough kind of comes in, or I hit that rough patch, it's mindset. What am I telling myself when I'm in it? And then how am I going to navigate my way through the journey? So,
No, this is just coming from somebody on the outside looking in, right?
mhm,
And I've had my fair share of conversations with social workers and things like that. And one of the things I have seen, and I know there's a lot of people that have experienced this, the lack of one understanding, that
mhm,
some people come in, not all, right? You know what I'm saying?
yeah,
I don't
yeah,
want to generalize and
for sure.
say put everybody in the same category and everything like that. But some of the ones that come in, they don't have the necessary skills that they need in order to engage with
Mhm,
families, or individuals for that matter. It's as if they're still following the old blueprint, right? You know what I'm
mm,
saying? Without
yeah,
looking at the playbook and going, maybe something needs to change,
yeah,
right?
that's a good point.
What do you? How do you approach a situation like that?
Yeah. Um, for me, when I'm dealing with people, even if it's people in the same community, people in the same family,
Hmm.
people in the same like company or whatever. However, I meet people, every person's an individual, right? So even in a family, like, you can look at your family and know that you're different from the four other people, the five other people in your family, right?
Hmm.
And so for me, it's about seeing every person as themselves, because that's what makes us unique as humans. So if
Right.
we were all um, acknowledged and treated the same, as far as this, this pattern fits for everybody, right? Some
Hmm.
people look good in plaid, some people look good in polka dots, some people look good in stripes and solids, right?
Yeah.
Not everybody can pull off, a fly bell bottom pants that used to be back in the day. Not everybody can look fly in some bell bottoms, right? Some
You
people
better
are like,
stop.
nah, I need some straight leg pants. I'm telling
You
my
better
age
stop.
here, but this is true, like, so we have to look at every single person as their own unique individual self. And I
Okay.
think
Okay.
that, also, kind of along the lines of what you were asking, understanding that what people bring to the table
Hmm.
doesn't always look the same. And I know we'll get more into talking about grief, but grief doesn't look the same for every person,
Yeah.
right? The way that I may grieve over my cat passing away, somebody
Hmm.
else may say, girl, that is a cat. Like, you will be okay. But for me, it
Hmm.
might truly be devastating, right?
Right.
And
Right.
so we have to recognize, and kind of my thing is normalize having conversations with people as their own unique individual selves, right?
Right.
Acknowledging people's stuff that comes up as that's Tony. That's how Tony is. We need to, Tony likes for people to listen. Tony doesn't want you to give advice because that's just how Tony is. But Dr. NaKaisha, she's completely different. She wants you to give advice, right? She wants you to jump in. And so there's just differences with how we show up as people. And I think paying attention, Tony, is a real key part to that. Like paying attention to what someone is saying or what someone is asking, right? Or maybe what they're
Hmm.
not saying or asking, because sometimes silence is very loud.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. I mean, you hit it. You hit it on the head right there. And like there's so many things that can go into that. Knowing when to talk, knowing when to hold space. That's the biggest challenge. A lot of people don't know how
Yeah.
to hold space with other individuals, right?
Hmm.
And so,
Yep.
one of the things that I do, and I want to get your thoughts on this. One of the things that I do when I talk with people, and I tell them, look, one, you don't have to spit, you don't have to say anything,
Hmm.
because what you're going to end up doing is guiding the conversation in a direction that you want it to go in instead of direction that needs to go in
Yeah.
with the person that you're with. So that's one of the things. Stop making it about you. It's not
Mm.
about you. It's about this individual. Secondly, learn how to be a visitor. They
Yeah.
go, what do you mean? Learn how to visit, because we got to
Yeah.
understand when a person invites you into their space, do you know the amount of energy and braveness that it takes for them to want you into that space?
Yeah.
Because now they're inviting you into a place to where they're going to be very, very vulnerable with
Hmm.
you.
Hmm.
So be a good visitor. And what I mean by
Yeah.
being a good visitor, look around the house to see what needs to be done.
Hmm.
Take away the responsibility of them wanting to take care of you
Yeah.
away from them. So go around, see what needs to be done. Dishes need to be done. Why don't you do that?
Hmm.
If if the laundry needs to be done, go ahead and do that. If they haven't eaten or anything like that, make sure they have food. Make sure that they have um, make sure they have the remote to their TV.
Yeah.
Let them be comfortable.
Yeah.
Be a visitor.
Hmm.
And then when they begin to talk, listen without the intent of responding,
Hmm.
right? But
Hmm.
listen with the intentions of understanding where they're coming from. Because a lot of times when people are going through something very traumatic and things like that, a lot of times they just want to be seen and heard. You said it in the beginning, right? These are keys that people need to put in, and these are
Right.
just a basis. It's not a solid blueprint for it, because it can always change, right? You know what I'm
Right.
saying? You
Yeah.
said it.
Yeah.
Sometimes you just need to just be where you need to be and
Yep.
listen to the next person, right? Listen to that person. Listen to what they're saying. Let them
Yep.
take you on their journey, because
Yep.
that silence can be loud, but that silence can be so welcome as well, right? And then
Hmm.
afterwards, you know what I'm saying? They may just be like, I don't want to talk about it no more. Well, would you like some ice cream?
Right.
right? Would you like some chocolate? We go. I can go get you some cookies, right?
Right.
Those things like that. But what are
Yeah.
what are your thoughts and your opinions on what I just mentioned right there?
Yeah. So I think the holding space, that's a really big piece of where not everyone is comfortable. And I know that that is something that, of course, in my education, learned. I learned how to put a name to what it was, right? I
Yeah,
think that I
yeah,
was doing that well before education started just because it was in the nature of what I did.
right.
But holding space, not everybody feels comfortable with that. So like even right now, if I just paused, there's going to be somebody that is just like, "Oh my god, why they stop talking? Can she say
Yeah.
something? Can he say something?" Right? Or um oh yeah, Tony, so what kind of headphones are that? Because they need to throw something in there, right? I just need
Hmm.
something to be said. And I think that when you talk about holding space, that's something that I want to say culturally is a big piece. So when you look at different cultures and how they deal with grief, with silence, with loss, with being with people, right? It looks different culturally. Whether it's if we're looking at, you know, male to female, if we're looking at young and old, right? Young people, they're like this, they're on the go. They constantly got to have things going.
Hmm.
That silence is not something that always connects in that particular culture, right? And so I think as we're talking about it, this can be kind of a challenge for people to think about, how do I hold space? Right? Am I the one that has to fill the silence, or am I comfortable if I'm sitting with Tony and Tony's going through something? Can I just sit and, you know, just allow the space to be present until whatever needs to happen next happens? So there was another word that you use. I just recently talked about this on an episode of my podcast that I actually have coming out in a week or so. And the word that you used was vulnerability. And I talked about how that word, a lot of people don't like the word vulnerability because it
Yeah.
means that I need to open up and I need to share, right? Or express or deal with those raw feelings and emotions that are coming up, and maybe allow someone else to see that. And that can be very scary for a lot of people. I mean, it can be definitely a very beautiful journey when you're traveling that vulnerability road, because what that means is that there's an expansion of yourself with being vulnerable, right?
Hmm.
There's a level of connection that has to happen with self in being vulnerable. So holding space and vulnerability is an interesting kind of dynamic that you pulled out.
Yeah, because a lot of times, and I want to add to what you're saying because you're absolutely right. A lot of times, what happens is that vulnerability means that you would have to take a break from being a survivor. You have to get out of survival mode, right?
Yep.
And when you have someone that has been fighting their whole entire life, for one, they're very skeptical of you,
Yeah.
right? they want to see who's in their space. Can they trust you? A lot of
Mm-hmm.
times, what the problem is that yes, they're trying to figure out if they can trust you, but can the question is, can they trust themselves?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Right? Because trust is earned, no matter
Yeah.
who you are and what you're going through. Trust
Mm-hmm.
is earned, whether if it's with yourself or with someone else. It's just
Right.
like if you meet someone And you know what I'm saying? And you know, you're looking at what are your intentions towards this person and vice versa, right?
Yeah.
So it comes back to, can I trust you? That's where the walls are. That's where those boundaries come in. That's why most people have a hard time with vulnerability, because can I be safe with you?
Mhm.
It's
Mhm.
the key to it. But I have to tiptoe around it for the simple fact of, I don't quite know if I can trust you in order to feel safe around you.
Mhm.
More look, 100 people, 100% of the time, people want a soft place to lay their head, whether it's men, women, or children. We
Right.
want a soft place to lay your head. Now, before I get into this, we got a comment by Shaped by Grief over here on Instagram. They said people are so scared of the word vulnerability, but there is so much beauty in leaning into the vulnerability. I
Mhm.
wish more people were open to holding space for vulnerability.
Sure.
Absolutely right. Shaped by Grief. Thank you for that as well. And yes, I agree with that as well. Right. One
Yeah.
thing about this thing that we do, is that, you know, I understand. And again, when I say this, this is only from my own perspective. There's no
Mhm.
right or wrong way to do it. It's
Right.
how you guide yourself or being guided by other people through these
Yeah.
levels, right? And so, you know, when you factor in those things as keeping yourself space, or keeping yourself safe,
Mhm.
that tends to play into your vulnerability, right? You know what I'm saying? Because it's a very, very fragile thing,
For sure.
especially especially if you're around people who have been hurt by multiple people.
Mhm.
Because at some point, the person who was vulnerable, at one point, showed why it wasn't nice to be vulnerable. Now, I'm not saying that everybody's that way, but
Mhm.
the narcissist is looking at that,
Mhm.
right?
Mhm.
And they're there to exploit that thing. And it
Mhm.
may happen to a point to where you're like, nope, I'm not doing that again. Look, I know
Mhm.
I was that guy.
Yeah.
I'll be the first one to admit that I was that guy where I said, nope, nope, I don't trust you enough to
Mhm.
be
Mhm.
open. Because, for one, here's another thing, a lot of people are so afraid to admit that they are scared.
Mhm. Mhm. Yeah.
They're, so, they're afraid to admit that they are scared. They're scared of what you may do to them,
Mhm.
right?
Yeah.
It's the woulda, coulda, shouldas that
Mhm.
gets us each and every time. I want to get your thoughts on that
Yeah.
before we move on to the next stage.
Yeah. Well, I think as you're talking about just the vulnerability side and being open, there is that level of trust in self that I'm going to put myself out there, and irregardless of how it turns out, right? Whether this particular, if we're talking about relationships, and relationships can mean friendships or,
Mhm,
intimate relationships, things of that nature. If I put
mhm.
myself out there, it's a 50-50 chance, right? It's either going to work or it's not. There's not really an in between there. So, you have that 50-50% chance. And I think this goes back to my point earlier about, even if you put yourself out there and it doesn't turn out the way that you thought that it would, the trust that you have in yourself is to say, okay, this didn't end the way that I thought that it would, but what am I telling myself about that? Right? Am I telling myself that, this is so painful that I can't go on, or this is so painful that I'm never going to do this again? Or, hey, this didn't turn out how I thought, but that's not going to stop me from continuing to pursue other relationships in whatever capacity that may look like. And
Mhm.
I think that the mindset is a big part of that, because what goes on in here has a lot to do with what we do out here.
Right, right. And I want to add to that, because a lot of that is environment versus atmosphere, right?
Mhm. Mhm.
If a person is in an environment where it dictates how you maneuver,
Mhm.
things like that, that can go many, many, many ways. A lot of times it's very destructive. But
Mhm.
if the atmosphere
Mhm.
If the atmosphere is very welcoming and
Mhm.
safe,
Mhm.
then it changes the dynamic of your intentions towards that individual. It helps to develop a sense of trust. If a person is safe with you, right?
Yeah.
If they feel safe, if the environment is one of those where there's not a whole lot of chaos, maybe it's just kind of mellow alike, right? You know what I'm
Yeah.
saying? That will allow people in turn to be a lot more brave
Mhm.
to open up and say, today I'm not okay.
Yeah.
You
Yeah.
know, maybe they'd start being honest with you and go, look, this scares me,
Mhm.
right?
Mhm. Mhm.
Because for one, here's where the problem lies. A lot of times people never announce their intent
Of
towards
course.
other people, right? And I'm a big intention.
Yeah.
Look, I need to know your intentions before I let you in.
Right. Yeah.
Are we doing A, B, C, D, or E, or F? Or are we
Right.
doing X, Y, and Z? You know what I'm saying? You
Right.
notice I left out a few of those
Right.
alphabets, right? Because in order, look, I need to know, are we
Right.
going to skip straight to the end, or are we going to take our time to
Right.
go through the alphabets first,
Right.
right? You know
Right.
what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So let me know your intentions. That way I know how to maneuver around,
Mhm.
right?
Yeah.
Then I know how to set those boundaries, but also remain respectful of that
For
individual
sure. Yeah.
as well,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Because look, so many times I have a lot of friends who are females and they go through the same thing, and I go, did you tell this person your intentions?
Yeah.
Well, then,
Mhm.
no. See, what you're doing is that you're assuming that this person knew what your intentions were, but you never laid down the ground rules.
Yeah.
You
Yeah.
just let it be the way that it was and was hoping for the best. And
Yep.
now that you've changed the way that those intentions look, and you now made it known, it's already too late.
Too late.
So
Yeah.
you know what I'm saying? And this is what look, I tell all my female friends this, like, look, make sure you lay out these intentions first
Yeah.
before you go around and make more bad decisions.
Mhm.
And they hate it when I tell them that. And I
I
tell
mean,
my male friends
communication
this
is
too.
huge. Yeah.
Right. Look, I tell my male friends this too.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because I go, look, if you're going to go out there with really bad intentions and you only got a one track mind, don't do it to a point to where someone else that can see the value in this person has to come
Mhm.
in and repair the damage that you do to them
That's
because
right.
you were too afraid to you make your intentions known. Don't trick
Yeah.
them and then expect them to accept it over a period of time because
For
you're
sure.
giving false expectations of
Yep.
individuals. It's just
Yep.
like being in the grief field. Make sure you lay out your intentions
That's right.
when you go into someone else's space. This is
Yep.
what I'm here for,
Yep.
right? I'm
Yep.
here to help walk you and help you navigate this thing. You know,
Mhm.
so and what we're going to do, we're going to
Is
work on whatever
yeah.
traumas,
X, Y, Z.
addictions.
Yeah.
Yeah, we're going to work on all of these things, and we're going to come in between to where when we do decide to part ways, you have everything that you need in order to navigate your next steps
Yeah.
comfortably, right?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so, let's talk about grief for a minute. You know, tell people your experiences with grief. You know, because
Yeah.
you've had quite a
Oh,
few
yeah.
too.
Yeah. I mean, over the course of what, 25 years or so,
Mhm.
um, you see a lot of grief, a lot of loss. And I think, I mean, personally and professionally, so I've personally been through things in life and professionally as well. And again, it's not everyone is blessed with, I'm going to say, circles, and that those circles can be like your inner circle, whether it's friends and family, or kind of that external circle, which is more community based. Um, but grief is one of those things, again, that it doesn't look the same for every person. And it can go in a lot of different ways. And I think the kind of the part that you're talking about just now when we're talking about relationships and people have to communicate, right? People also have to communicate, not necessarily about their grief, but maybe where they're struggling. And I think the big part of that is being able to let someone know where you are and or what you need,
Mm,
because that can help you to cope better with the grief, right? Because if nobody knows that I'm over here struggling, right? I'm dealing with my grief, I'm over here struggling, nobody knows. It just gets heavier and heavier because I don't have an outlet for that grief. And
right.
again, I think as we were talking about holding space, even if I just say, Tony, I'm dealing with something, I had this loss, I'm grieving, but if I call, it's cool if we just sit on the phone and nobody says anything, right? That's me
Mhm.
saying where I've been and what I need. And I don't need anything more than that. But if I do, I'll let you know, right? So some of this is about taking responsibility as adults for us to communicate with other people. Now, again, that trust word comes back in where we feel we can trust person, right? Whether it's in our family circle, friend circle, maybe it's a coworker, a neighbor, or some, spiritual religious leader, whomever that may be. But just knowing that I have to put myself out there if that is a struggle spot, right? Because grief can be very tricky.
Yeah.
And I talk to people about this all the time. Like, you think, okay, like I'm in a good space. It's been 6 months. And then you walking through the local grocery store or the market, and all of a sudden you smell something. And oh boy, that smells like grandmama's house. And then right in the middle of the grocery store, here come the tears, right?
Hmm. Hmm.
Because that smell just like grandmama's, or that song reminds me of this friendship, or this group of people, or whatever it is. And grief, it doesn't have a beginning and an end time. A lot of
No.
times people will say, well, how long am I going to feel like this? And I'm like, I'm good, but I'm not that good. I can't give
Yeah.
you a specific end date. And I wish it were, at the end of 3 months, like, you're not going to feel like you do. But that's not how this works. So grief is, one of those things. I think the biggest piece is that we have to sit with our grief
Hmm.
to know how big, how small that grief is, to then know what our next move is as far as how we're going to navigate through that, right?
Right.
Do I need support from people, or am I in a space where I can navigate this on my own, right, with minimal support? Or do I need something different? And guess what? It can look different today in month one versus month three, right? Month one, I might not have needed anybody. But month three, I might be heavy in that grief and I need a lot
Hmm.
more support. So as you know, it ebbs and flows. It doesn't always look the same.
No. And that's the beautiful part about it is it's not supposed to, right?
Mhm.
I think part of the challenge is, Dr. Keisha, is that people often will look at people in their community and kind of mimic what they do when they've gone through something hard,
Mm,
right? They kind of look at them and go, "Oh, I'm supposed to do it this way," and then they
right.
look at somebody else and go, "Oh, maybe I'm supposed to do it that way," and
Yeah,
things like that, right? And not understanding that this is their own individual journey,
that's
and
right.
there's no right or wrong way to do it, but you just can't do it the way that you see other people because
Hmm.
you may find yourself going into a snag, and that's the hardest place to come back out because it begins to tumble out of control after that point,
Yeah,
right? Because you're like,
yeah.
oh no, you don't understand. I just saw such and such over here doing this over here, and I'm doing it just the way that they did it too. I don't know why I'm in this situation.
Yeah.
And I go, look, a lot of what that is called shared grief, right? And
Hmm.
and they go, what do you mean? I
Mm-hmm.
go, because you're watching what they're doing and you're mimicking what they're doing.
Mm-hmm.
You're not really putting in the work because you're not
Yeah,
seeing what's happening behind the scenes. You're not
for
seeing
sure.
what's happening behind closed doors. You're not seeing the tears. You're not seeing the hurt and the pain, the things that they're hiding from you. Because right now, what they're doing is that they have on a mask.
Yeah.
They're showing you a brave face.
Mm-hmm.
Why? Because they're afraid to show you how much it's hurting them. So of
Yeah.
course, what you're going to see all the message. You're going to see the messiness. This is the one thing that people never pay attention to, right? You're going to
Yeah,
see the messiness because for one, you may see them start drinking,
for sure. Yep.
right? You know what I'm saying? Which is going to eventually start to show little pieces of that pain.
Yeah,
They may even start doing anything worse, right? You know what I'm saying? You got some people that go out here and become very promiscuous,
for
right?
sure.
You know what I'm
Yeah.
saying? And things like that because they're looking for a safe place to lay their head, but they don't know how to do it. So the physical touch is what they're needing, just in
Right.
a more reckless way,
For
right?
sure.
Some people may get hooked on harder drugs,
Mm-hmm.
things like that. And so you're this is what you're going to see. And if you base what you're doing around what they do, then you're going to find yourself in a really tough situation.
Yeah.
So and you're right, there's no right, there it's not linear, right?
Mm-hmm.
What happened, what I'm saying, what happened 9 years ago and how I
Right.
dealt with it is totally different from how I deal with it today. Is it
Yeah.
still a struggle? Yes, it is, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's always going to be a struggle.
For sure.
And here's a truth that I want to add to that. Grief is nothing but love, unexpressed love,
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
right?
Yep.
It's the unexpressed love. It's the times that you didn't get to say goodbye. It's the unspoken words that you didn't get to say to that individual. It's
Yeah.
the missed dinners and the missed breakfasts, the missed conversations. It's all of these
Mm-hmm.
different things wrapped up into this big old ball of yarn. And
Yeah.
the beautiful part about it is all you have to do is to begin to pull at it,
Mm-hmm.
begin to pull at it and let it unravel. But
Yeah.
be willing to go through the transformation that you need to go through as far as the process of
Mm-hmm.
what that looks like, right?
Yeah.
What are your thoughts? What are your thoughts on that?
I heard something similar to what you said about grief, and it was kind of a positive spin on it, in saying that grief is, and don't quote me on this part, but grief is demonstrating the amount of love that you have for the person that you lost,
Mm-hmm,
right?
mm-hmm,
And so I remember when I heard that, it's been, a few years ago, that I said I'd never thought about it in that way. And that's why it's so big, right? And that's why it's so
mm-hmm,
pronounced, and that's why it shows up like it does. And, so I started kind of thinking back at people, and I'm talking about specific, deaths of people that have passed away, and what my grief journey looked like with different individuals. And I was like, I guess that does make sense, right?
mm-hmm,
And I think, to your point about grief, um is that it looks different with each loss, of whatever that is,
mm-hmm,
right? If it's the loss of a family member, or a lifestyle, right? That
mm-hmm,
sometimes, we're looking at people, you know, in our country, in immigrant situations where people are migrating and they're immigrants. And so, or there's war and people have to leave everything that they knew and start a whole nother life with
mm-hmm,
nothing, and
mm-hmm,
so there's this grief and loss of life as I so knew it, and now it's something completely different, right? And
mm-hmm.
so every experience carries its own weight, right? And I think, as we, have this conversation and there are people that are listening, it's important to think about, again, what is the weight that I'm holding, or what does this feel like to me? How
Yeah.
do I sit with what's showing up, right?
Mhm.
Um, it, I guess the visual that kind of comes to mind is when you go to a restaurant, or I know this is a horrible example, and I do not eat at McDonald's, but McDonald's, where they have like small, medium, large, and I don't even know if they have extra large, but they used to at some point, or super size or something.
I
But
don't even know
I
anymore.
don't even know. So, but I know that they used to have, the containers, and the sizes just got bigger and bigger. But you
Mhm.
could kind of choose, what you wanted. And depending upon what you got, it had more, let's just say, fries in it, right? And as we think about grief, grief can be that way, that it
Mhm.
may come in these different size packages, right? But the biggest piece that I think I keep going back to is, if you're afraid of sitting with your grief, it's going to be there longer. Like you said, that particular thing may always exist, right, in your world, whatever
Mhm.
that loss
Mhm.
is, that grief is, but it doesn't have to be as heavy as it would if you sat with it, to know what it is and be able to
Mm.
understand it for yourself.
Can I add to that, right? Because that could go another way as well.
Mhm.
And the reason why I say that is because I've seen this happen. That it does sometimes people don't know how to let go of the heaviness,
Mhm.
right? And
Mhm.
it's the connection that they have with the individual, and
Mhm.
that they don't mind it being heavy because it reminds them of them, right? They're
Mhm.
so afraid to let go and let the healing start, is that, and this also comes from a place of being a survivor slash victim,
Mhm.
depending on the individual, right? Because sometimes we as human beings, we're very confusing.
Sure.
If I let go of this heaviness, I no longer have a reason to not be a victim. I can always
Mhm.
blame what I'm going through
Right.
and my actions. You know what I'm saying? I can always have an excuse for my actions, for what I'm going through. I can
Yeah.
always go, well, you don't know what happened to me when I was six
Understand.
years
Right.
old, or you know what I'm
Right.
saying? You don't know what I'm feeling when I lost my
Yep.
mother, or it's always, they always have an excuse, right?
Mhm. Mhm.
And so they're afraid to let that go.
Yeah.
They're afraid to let that go because they're like, if I let this go, then who am I after this?
Mhm.
Who am I supposed to be? Because you know what I'm saying? Like, how do I let go
Yeah.
and want something better? Because deep down inside, once you get to a certain point, you always want something better, right?
Mhm.
Unless, now here's where it gets real tricky. Unless you are the narcissist,
Mm.
right? If you're the narcissist, and again,
Mm.
when I say this, I'm only speaking from my own personal experience. What I found was is that even now, my narcissist still uses the passing of our son to do and justify the things that she does,
Mm.
right? Whether if it's being a very um,
Mm.
overly emotional individual
Sure.
or a very devious individual,
Mm.
she always has that excuse.
Mm.
And I've learned over a period of time, I said, you know what? I'm just going to let you do what you do. It ain't got nothing to do with me,
Yeah.
right? So you do what you do, and I'm gonna do what I do.
Mhm.
Now, again, it depends on the individual and what you're willing to give up. Can you trust the process enough to feel safe with the next steps that you take?
Yeah.
And I think now, which leads me to my next question, because how do you tie that into being the amazing social worker that you are, and dealing with the seniors that you're around, because you've had to deal with grief in that aspect as
Mhm.
well, right? Because when
Yeah.
you're working with them, things like that, you know that there's a possibility that tomorrow may not come for them.
Mm-hmm.
right?
Yeah.
So how do you step with them to help them navigate it as well when they lose someone that they've been in these homes with for quite some time?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So it's been a while since I've worked with my seniors, but of course I'm around other seniors in different capacities. And when I worked directly with them, it's always a conversation, a conversation about knowing that you have the supports here as you need it, but
Mhm.
also look around your space and connect with other seniors that are here so that
Right.
you all have one another as a support. But another big part of that, Tony, was remembering to celebrate the life of the person
Mm.
that was lost. It is
Yeah.
so huge, right? That we find ways to navigate the grief. And I find that celebrating them in whatever capacity. That's the
Mhm.
one thing that the seniors did love. They would, share stories, and they would, you know, can we get a cake? They loved cake. Can we get a cake? Y'all just want a reason to get some cake. Yes,
Who
we
don't
can get
love
a cake.
cake now? You know what I'm saying? Who don't love cake? Come on now. I'm with the seniors on this one. Can we get some cake? Bring it on.
Yes, they wanted cake. So we always had some type of a cake or something just to bring everybody together. And the interesting thing about that is that when they were grieving the loss of one of the people in their community,
Mhm.
they would all come to the gathering space because they knew we're going to have like a memorial, and we're going to share stories, and we're going to have cake and coffee. And for them, they knew their safe space, that if they wanted to share, they could. If they chose to just sit and listen, they could also be there, right? And
Mhm.
hold space for those that did need to release, right?
Right.
Or whatever the case may be. And so I think that that's a big part of this grief journey that I love to impart with people, is to not only think about the grief and the sadness and the loss, but also think about the opportunities to be able to share stories and celebrate. Because that really is a big part of where I say it really does come full circle, because you're
Mhm.
not forgetting about there's another side to grief, and it's not all always bad, but the blessing that we get to honor that person by keeping their memory alive. And this is for people that have passed and people that want to be celebrated,
Mhm.
right?
Mhm.
Now there is the other side where something may have ended and we don't want to. We don't want that thing to resurrect, whatever it may be or whomever it may be. So
Mhm.
understand that there's levels to the grief that we're talking about. But as we're talking about like the seniors and how they navigated this, it was in a very unique way because they had time, experience, and wisdom on their
Mhm.
side.
Oh my God, yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it's I love that you brought that up because there's the celebration part I think is missing in our culture, right?
Yeah.
Because I have partners from Africa, and
Mhm.
they always are talking smack. They were like, "You Westerners don't know how to grieve,"
I mean,
right?
they say it. Yes.
Yeah. Well, and when I say this, because I've attended one of their ceremonies,
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
and I've gone on a grief walk with them,
Mhm.
and I would tell you it's a celebration. And they have one rule: you don't stop moving until you can't move anymore.
That's
And
right.
that can take days and days and days on end. The music don't stop till the last
Yep.
person is down and out,
Yep.
right?
Yep.
And so, you do whatever you need to do. You're dancing, you're screaming, but you don't stop moving. And
Mhm.
I use that as part of a technique that I use with people. I said, look, grief needs to move throughout your body. It's vibration, right? You know
That's
what I'm
right.
saying? It's
Mhm.
frequency and
Yep.
things like that. If you don't allow it to move through your body and allow it to do what it needs to do, it's going to get trapped in there and it's just going to bounce around till eventually you're going to start having symptoms of
Mhm.
something physical. And then when you go to the
Sure.
doctor, they're not going to be able to figure it out. So that leads to going on multiple medications because
Mm.
they don't know what's wrong with you,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
So one of the things I do say, and I totally agree with you, what you said is celebrate that person.
Mhm.
But most importantly, before they go, celebrate them.
That's right. Give them
Right
their flowers while they're yet
there,
still here.
you
Ain't that what we
go.
say? Yeah.
There you go. I look. I have a friend of mine. Her husband works all the time,
Mm.
and and I've seen her in action. And I don't think she does it intentionally, but I did bring it to her attention because I didn't agree with what she was doing. I said, look, that man goes to work 12, 14 hours a day. He comes home and you're constantly on his case. Why
Mm.
didn't you do this? And why didn't you do that? But did you ask him how his day was?
Mm.
When is the last time, instead of expecting flowers, did you buy flowers for him?
Mm. Good point. Yeah.
Well, when is the last time that you poured him a glass of wine
Mhm.
instead of coming home and he has to deal with this right here? When's the last time you done that? Now, I just don't get on women's
Sure.
cases. I get on men's cases too. I
Yeah.
do. And I look at them and say the same thing. When's the last time that you bought that woman flowers?
Yeah.
She's doing all the things as a wife and things like that. When's the last time that you offered to take that load off of her? When's the last time that what I'm saying you bought her breakfast in bed? When's the last time that you tucked her in without
Mm.
any sort of expectations?
Mhm.
Right? You know what I'm saying? Just tuck her
Yeah.
in, turn on the TV, give her, what I'm saying? When is the last time that you got her headphones out and said, baby, look, go ahead, listen to this?
Yeah. Yeah.
When
That's
is the
good.
last time that you've done? Look, don't wait till they're gone to celebrate them. Celebrate them now because they play an integral part in your life. So do that, right?
Yeah.
Because you don't want to miss the opportunity, and then you wake up one day and the opportunity is no longer there.
That's right. Yeah.
So don't take it for granted. Don't ever take it for granted. And so now I want to talk about your podcast. When did you start
Yeah.
podcasting?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, when did you start podcasting?
Yeah, so my Feelings Over Tea podcast, I actually started in during the pandemic, so
Okay.
2020, and took a little bit of a hiatus because life and things and education all kind of came swarming in, and so I took a hiatus and I started back up last year, so 2024, and Tony Lynch, the Honorable Tony Lynch, is actually going to be a guest on my show. So I thought I would
Yes.
highlight that.
You have. I
um,
told you you have me at hello.
yes, nice. So, yes, my Feelings Over Tea podcast, we talk about all things life and mental health related. Um, some great episodes up to now, and just sharing things about mental health and the impact, mental health and stigma. I've had recently a guest that was on and talked about their experience in having to leave not only her country where she had lived, but also her family, leaving her family behind to, restart life. Where she kind of had to start all over and just navigate this new journey. So, a lot of things that I think conversations that we need to have, kind of like we're having today, these necessary
Mhm.
conversations. And a lot of it is just how does it impact our mental health? So, it is out there. Again, my Feelings Over Tea podcast. Thank you for letting me throw in a little shout outs.
Of course, of course.
for the
And where
podcast.
can is that on YouTube or is that on all of
Yes,
the
you can find
podcast
it on
channels?
YouTube. What else? Libsyn, Apple Podcasts. I think there's some other ones that are out there. So if you just Google My Feelings Over Tea podcast, you will see it. I'm also on Instagram at My Feelings Over Tea, so you can also find me there.
Mhm.
And on YouTube, I'm at First Lady Giggles. So the number one ST Lady Giggles. So that's where you can find me on YouTube.
I love that. I love that.
Yes.
And so now, which leads me to my next question: how can people find you?
How can y'all find me? So if you want to learn more about me, you can go to my website, www.NaKaisha That is NAKAISHA Tolbert-Banks.com.
I love that. And now, my next question would be: if you had a superpower, what would it be?
If I had a superpower, well, this is a very funny question, actually, because just about 4 hours ago, one of my children told me that I was super mom. So I don't know what all that entails, but I was given that title earlier today. Um, so let's see if I had a superpower. Um, I think that it would be that I could fly just like zippy zippy from here to there. That means that I could travel to like different places really quickly. That would be my superpower, that I could fly.
I like that. I like
Yeah.
that. And
Yeah.
now, one last thing: if you could leave the audience with something, what would you leave them with?
Yeah. I would leave the audience with, for those of you that are listening and watching, to love yourself even through the tough times. So when grief gets tough, love yourself and probably love yourself even more during that time. And to trust yourself. Because if you are listening to this podcast and you're in the midst of your grief journey,
Mhm.
you're here at this point, and your ability to make it through tough things has literally been 100% because you're still here.
Mhm.
So you have purpose.
I love that. I love that. And with that being said, guys, we're going to wrap up this episode of Grief Let's Talk About It podcast. And for everyone who has been tuning in over here on Instagram, Facebook, LinkedIn, YouTube, Twitter, Twitch, Rumble, and all of the other platforms that are out there, guys, thank you so much. But if you have not already, do me a favor. One, go over to YouTube, find Dr. NaKaisha's podcast, subscribe to it. Show her that support. She's got some amazing stuff up there. By the way, thank you for the link that you sent me. I really enjoyed that a lot. And so, guys, go over there and check it out. She got a lot more. If you're curious about what I'm talking about, you're gonna have to go over there and check it out. All right, do me that favor. But also, if you just now tuning in and you have not already, do me a favor. Head on over to that YouTube channel. Look, it's going across the bottom. Let's talk about a podcast. We are on YouTube. Hit that subscribe button, hit that bell notification so you'll be notified every time that we drop a new episode. But most importantly, maybe these conversations are not for you just now. And maybe you know somebody who can benefit from the conversations that we have. Please share this along with them. But most importantly, leave a comment, right? You know what I'm saying? Let us know what you think. And just check them out, right? And then after that, guys, just a reminder, the conference is coming up next month, April 25th, 26th, and the 27th. So it's a live global grief conference. Tune in for that as well. We got a lot more stuff coming, presenters, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Right? You know what I'm saying? And don't forget to pick up. Let me show it over here. Don't forget to pick up the book, Men Grieve Too. Go on lulu.com, look up my name, Tony Lynch. You guys can get your copy of that as well. That's another anthology that I was a part of. You guys will not be disappointed. Dr. NaKaisha, Thank you so much for being on the show today. I can't wait to be on your show. We're going to be jumping right on over there as well.
Yes.
You know what I'm saying? Thank you for such an amazing conversation. We'd love to do this again. So, yeah, please let me know whenever you get ready. We'd love to have you
Absolutely.
back on. For
So,
everyone else, guys, we're going to wrap this one up. Thank you for tuning in. Thank you for allowing me to keep bringing these conversations to you guys. I'm going to see you guys in the next one. We're out.
all right. Peace.